is based on four basic principles. The EU is a cooperation organization of now 28 member states, originally 6 when it was founded in 1957, and it has now expanded to 28 member countries. The latest one is Croatia. Now the problem is that all these countries are sovereign countries with their own laws, their own regulations, their own languages, their own traditions, their own cultures and their own languages. How do you bind 28 very different countries together? And let's not forget, apart from the difference which I mentioned, there are also great differences in economic development. We have countries like Sweden or Finland or Germany, which are among the most advanced countries in the world. But there are also countries which are considerably less developed. For example, some recent new member states, like Bulgaria or Croatia. There are huge differences in economic development. So how do we bind these countries together? The EU is based on four basic principles: freedom of movement of goods, of services, of capital, and of labor. It is originally the EU, it was originally called the European Economic Community. Later it became the European Communities, and now it has become the European Union. Originally it was an economic cooperation organization, but it has now evolved into an organization dealing with much more than only economic affairs. We come back to the issue of free movement of goods, services, labor and capital, and these are the pillars on which the economic integration of the EU is founded. Now, free movement between of all these things is only possible if all countries adjust their laws and the regulations to each other. To give you an example, you produce a beer in Germany. In Germany, they have special requirements for beer. It's called the so-called Reinheitsgebot. It is standards for beer making, which were already dating back to the 16th century. It's 500 years old. Now, in the UK, they make a beer according to different recipes than in Germany. So if the UK, if British companies want to export beer to Germany, maybe they do not conform to the same standards and requirements as German beer, because they have different requirements. They do not adhere to the German Reinheitsgebot. So then the Germans could say, sorry, your beer does not conform to our requirements, so you are not allowed to export your beer to Germany. Now, if you use that kind of regulations, beer is just one small example, but it applies to almost all kinds of products. So if each country would have its own standards and requirements, there would be little trade between EU countries. So in order to make trade possible between the different EU countries, it is necessary that laws and regulations are adjusted to each other. How does that work? The EU sets so-called framework directives. So it is a kind of super law. The EU makes a super law, some basic requirements, for example, for the production of beer. If you want to produce beer, it must at least meet those and those requirements. For example, it must have an alcohol content of, for example, not more than 10%. It should have other things like that. Some minimum requirements to which which would make it possible for countries to trade with each other. And then each country then translates these super laws into their own national laws. That is a process which is called transposition. So the EU has a super law on, for example, beer. This is what the minimum requirements for production of beer. Then each country translates those minimum requirements into their own national laws. As long as these are adjusted to each other, that makes it possible to have free trade. So British can export beer as they make it to Germany, and German can export beer as they make it and according to their requirements to the UK and to other countries in Europe. This is an example for goods, and the same applies to services, to movement of capital, so that you can easily send money from one EU country to another country, and also to freedom of movement of labor. So that you have the right to work in all EU countries. That is necessary in order to create a truly integrated market. And we have seen some very good results of that, because thanks to the integrated market, there has been much more trade within the EU than otherwise would have been the case. If all EU countries would have their own laws and standards and have their own border controls and their own customs controls, there would be much less trade and as a result much less economic development and much less prosperity. So we owe our prosperity for a great deal to the economic integration which has been made possible by the EU. So this is briefly about the economic integration. And one of the biggest steps forward in economic integration was the adoption of a common currency of many EU countries, the euro. You know, of course, the euro, which is now common used currency in, I forgot the exact figure, but I think it's now about 17 member countries. It's not yet all member countries, because a country needs to meet very strict criteria before it can join the monetary union. And not all countries have met those criteria yet. But in principle, all countries are working to meet those criteria, so one day they will also join the monetary union, with the exception of the UK, which has an opt-out clause, and Denmark, if I'm not mistaken.
Sweden.
What?
And Sweden.
Oh, Sweden. Okay, so there are some exceptions. As you can imagine, the fact that we have a common currency greatly lowers transaction costs between countries, and that also makes trade and also travel much more easy. If I travel to France or to Germany, I don't need to exchange money. I can just use my own currency and use that. Besides that, what you see is because it's much easier to compare prices. So, for example, a car or a television set, the price is set in euros, and you can easily compare prices between different countries. And if I find that the television in Germany is maybe 300 euros cheaper than in the Netherlands, maybe I take my car, I drive to Germany, and I buy the television set there, and maybe other things as well. That has also an effect of price convergence. So slowly the price levels in EU countries will converge to each other, thanks to greater transparency. This is about market integration. But now the EU has evolved into something much more. The EU is more than just an economic community. It is the European Union. And it is responsible for many more areas, including strengthened cooperation in justice, in home affairs, and in many other issues, also including foreign policy. EU countries want to build a common foreign policy. And I am myself an example of that, because I actually am not from the EU. I come from the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But in order to create a common foreign service for the EU, all member countries of the EU, they send their own officials to work in a common foreign service of the EU. It's called the EEAS, European External Action Service. And I am one. So that is an example. So the EU is dealing with many more areas. As you probably know, the EU is now faced with two major crises and challenges. One is already for a very long time the crisis in Greece. Greece was at risk of default as a result of very bad fiscal policies, and EU countries needed to come to the rescue of Greece, and it has cost the EU a lot of money. And EU taxpayers, they ask, why the hell should we pay our taxes, because EU money is EU taxpayers' money? And EU taxpayers ask, why the hell should the EU use my tax money to help out the Greeks who have made a mess of things themselves? There is no easy answer to that question. The only answer that we can give is, you're right, they've made a mess of things and it costs a lot of money, but if we don't help them, the costs will be much bigger. So better to help them now and try to fix things so that a reform, so that it will not happen again. That is the answer that we have to give to them. But it remains an issue. EU taxpayers don't like their tax money being wasted. No taxpayers likes to see their tax money wasted. Probably you also don't like your tax money being wasted. And therefore the EU must always explain what is it doing and why are we using EU taxpayers' money in sometimes very big amounts for the things we do. What are we trying to achieve? The second big crisis which the EU is facing is the refugee crisis. Millions and millions of refugees have been uprooted in the Middle East, especially from Syria, but also Libya, and they try anything to get to the EU, because the EU is seen as a safe and prosperous place to be, where you can be safe and where you can build a new future. That is also the other side of success. If you are very successful in providing safety and providing prosperity to your citizens, then you also become attractive to people from other countries. And how do you deal with that? How do you integrate citizens, people from other countries, refugees? The EU doesn't yet have an answer to that. We are overwhelmed. Many countries are now closing their borders. There is lots of resistance in EU countries against the arrival of refugees, because many people think these refugees come here, they come from a different culture, they have a different religion, they take our resources, they take our houses, they make use of our health services, we have to pay for them, and it costs us a lot of money and it will cause a lot of problems. Why the hell should we allow these people to come here in the first place? That is a question which many people will ask. As I said, the EU does not yet have a very good response to the overall refugee crisis. One thing is very clear, even if there is no response of the EU. The EU can only respond if all countries work together. There is no single country in the EU which single-handedly could resolve the refugee crisis. it is too big and too overwhelming, with millions and millions of people, sometimes fleeing war, but many others trying to build up a better life because they don't see a future in their own countries. And only by coming to close cooperation can we try to manage these refugee flows. We cannot stop them, we can somehow manage them and try to divide the burden in a fair manner over all the EU countries. That's about the EU in general. Now we come to Moldova, and I will tell you something about the implementation of the association agreement in Moldova. I used the same presentation which I used a couple of weeks ago. It was for a seminar which was called Learn the Way to Success. I have to admit, in the current circumstances, that sounds a bit ironic. I didn't invent the name. But I will still talk about implementation of the association agreement. First, what is the association agreement? There are two things I want to say about that. One, it is not a stepping stone to EU membership. There is no talk at this moment of an EU membership for Moldova. For various reasons. In the first place, because Moldova itself is not prepared for it in many respects. And in the second place, because there is big resistance within the EU against further enlargement. So at the moment, there is no talk about a membership perspective. So the association agreement does not make Moldova a candidate country. So it is an associate country of the EU. We do not exclude membership in the future, even if it is in the far future. So that is the first thing I have to say about the association agreement. The second thing about the association agreement is that it is a deal. It's an agreement. It is a deal. It is a quid pro quo. The quid is we have that the EU opens its market fully to Moldova. That is the so-called free trade area. The EU opens its markets to a wide range of Moldovan products and services, much wider than was the case before. So that is one incentive which we give to Moldova. The second thing is that we will provide Moldova with a lot of assistance, financial assistance and technical assistance, which Moldova can use to reform the country. So this is the incentive we give, to open our markets and to provide assistance. But we want something in return. As I said, it's a quid pro quo. What we want in return is political and economic reform based on an EU model, which means that Moldova will align its legislation with that of the EU. In the economic field, that is in the part of the DCFTA, Moldova will align its economic legislation with that of the EU. And we also expect Moldova to undertake deep political reform so that Moldova becomes a stable democracy based on the rule of law and based on respect for human rights. And why do we want that? Because Moldova is a neighboring country of the EU. We want, as EU, we would like to live in a safe neighborhood. We want all our neighboring countries to be stable and developed. It is in your interest and it is in our interest. So that is what we want. That is the deal. You undertake political reform, we open our markets and we provide you with assistance. That's the deal. In the areas where you live, you have probably a very important rural economy. Many people earn their living in agriculture. You may have also some industries, quite often related to agriculture, food processing industries. The free trade area makes it much easier for the farmers and the producers in your places to export to the EU. So that will stimulate the economic development in your regions. And there's another important effect. It may, now that Moldova is part of the EU free trade area, Moldova in principle can become much more attractive to foreign investors. So there may be foreign investors who would like to establish production facilities in Moldova, including in some of the localities in which you are based. That will bring economic development, that will bring jobs, that will bring employment to your areas. So these are some very positive effects of the free trade area. The EU has a comprehensive policy to support the reform process in all the neighboring countries of the EU, both to the east and to the south. It comprises not only countries like Ukraine and Moldova, but it also comprises countries along the Mediterranean, from Morocco to Egypt. Very important is also for citizens of Moldova the visa liberalization. That is not part of the association agreement. I have to make that clear. It is separate. It is also not based on an agreement. It is based on the so-called Visa Liberalization Action Plan. Moldova has implemented many measures in order to meet the requirements for a visa-free regime. That includes, for example, specific measures against corruption. It includes better border management, better migration policies. It also includes the issuing of biometric passports. I assume that now most of you have biometric passports, which makes it possible for you to travel visa-free to the EU. And also, an important requirement for the visa-free regime was the adoption of anti-discrimination policies. So the adoption of the anti-discrimination law, which, as you know, has been a rather controversial issue here in Moldova, is also one of the requirements for a visa-free regime. Moldova is also a member of the energy community. What is the energy community? The energy community is an organization of neighboring countries of the EU in the Balkans and also in Eastern Europe who align their energy policies and their energy legislation with that of the EU. The EU has reformed its overall energy policies in order to make more interconnections between EU member countries possible, and also to make sure that there is a secure supply of energy, and that that the provision, the trade in energy is based on market principles. Moldova is also a part of the energy community, which means that Moldova has to reform its energy policies and its energy infrastructure so that it will function according to market principles. That means a separation between production, transit and distribution of energy, and also a liberalization of prices. Then we have the so-called aviation agreement. Moldova and the EU have concluded an aviation agreement which makes it possible to increase air connections between Moldova and the EU. So it means that Moldovan airlines have free access to the EU, and vice versa. So that could, in principle, lead to an increase of flight connections to Europe, an increase in airlines, an increase in flight connections, and hopefully, by liberalization of aviation, to a lowering of prices. So eventually it will lead to more flights and cheaper flights for Moldovan citizens to European destinations. That is part of the aviation agreement. But the aviation agreement is also a separate agreement. It is not part of the association agreement. But implementing the association agreement, which means reforming Moldova according to the European model, is not so easy. There are a lot of problems and challenges. And I will name the 5 most important challenges we have. There are many challenges, but I would mention these as the 5 most important ones. It is political instability, unfavorable business environment, financial sector instability, a weak justice sector, and finally, Transnistria. We consider it important that the Moldovan authorities take measures to build an open, tolerant and multi-ethnic society, because Moldova is a multi-ethnic society. It is difficult for business to do business here in Moldova. In the first place, because there is a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. You have to get a permit for this, you have to get a permit for that. And if you don't have connections to the right political party, then maybe you will not get your permit. There's also a problem of access to finance. Business need finance in order to grow. So there are many constraints on business. As a result, economic development in Moldova is not as strong as it could be. And Moldova has not attracted so many foreign investors as it could. If the business environment would be better, there would be many more investments coming to Moldova. The DCFTA is also a way to address this issue, to create a more transparent and predictable business environment by basing the economic regulatory framework on the EU model. And the DCFTA is actually the first of this kind of agreement. We have normal free trade areas, which just means the lowering or the abolition of customs duties. But the DCFTA goes much further, and it provides for a free trade for goods and services with a market of 500 million consumers. So it greatly widens the access to Moldovan produce. But very important is that the DCFTA is also a roadmap for reforms, because the DCFTA also contains requirements on, for example, competition policy, procurement policy, intellectual property rights protection, technical standards, industrial standards, food safety standards, etc. So DCFTA will create a similar regulatory framework as in the EU. And that will make Moldova more attractive for business and will make it more easy for business to develop.
I was trying to teach you was that you have to keep in mind your audience. You have an audience where you are working for. Not for your mother, not for your brother or your husband or your friend. No, you work for an audience. You just immediately start with sentences that interest your audience. So if you make a program about agriculture problems and the European Union, you start by saying, we have a treaty with the European Union. What is in for you? How do you benefit or not? That's where this program is about. Point. That's all. Everybody is just interested in what is in for me. They are not interested in boring stories about treaties or about the European Union. Ooh, it's so boring. No, they just want to know, what does it mean for my wallet if the farmers, thanks to the treaty, have better possibilities to export to the European Union or to whatever third country. Perhaps that means that the prices of apples and vegetables and paprikas go up in Macedonia. That is what people is interested in. So always keep in mind, what does your audience want? What is your audience interested in? So the first sentences of your program are the most important ones, because there your audience decide to watch your program or not. So no padding, no talking about nothing, no turning around the hot pot. Just start eating it. Make people have appetite in your story by showing that it is very interesting for them to watch, because they are involved. It's about them. It's not about some highbrow politicians. If I see a program about agriculture, I want to see farmers, I want to see fruit sellers, I want to see housewives who buy things. I want to have those expert opinions, and they are much more interesting than all them boring men that are in some ministry and telling a lot of blah blah in abstractions. Don't use abstractions. Don't say it is expensive. No, tell how expensive. In money, don't say it is high, tell how high. Be as concrete as possible. Because the paradox is that when you are explicit in your words, in your images, you stimulate the fantasy. I give you an example. When you're talking about a car, you think about something of metal and 4 wheels that costs a lot of money. That's what you think. But when I'm talking about a yellow Volkswagen, you see it before your eyes. So you stimulate fantasy by not using abstractions. Not it is warm, not it is cold, but how warm, how cold. And show images. Use images. And if you have abstractions, you can't use images. And television is all about images. You use too much text, and you have to let the images talk. So what you do is you turn it around. You say, here are we, the humble Moldovan Republic, and what is this fantastic European Union doing to help us? No, you have to turn it around, of course. You are the persons that are in the center. It's about you. So here we are, a country that is in a developing state, and there is European Union, and they want to make a treaty with us. Believe me, they don't do it because they love you. They do it because they want to have you in their influence atmosphere. They look at Russia and they want you at their side. So you have a position to bargain and to negotiate. So don't say, here we are and we want to go to this fantastic European level. Let them go to hell. This is nonsense. Here we are, and tell us what you can offer us. So if we have a problem in education, because of demographic things, because of the other arguments you gave me, emigration, what can we expect from the European Union? I do it just improvising by heart. Can we use, for example, computers to teach from a central point decentral villages? Is that is there a technician who can explain that this is a solution? Because it's very old-fashioned to think in schools and in a teacher in a decentral school. No, you can put the children in a classroom, you make a screen, and you give central lessons to small villages. Okay, European Union, you like us so much, you want to help us, build us such a system. And then I want to hear the reaction of the European Union. And then we are in the heart of the problem, and everybody is sitting on the point of their chair. And you are not beggars. You are a fantastic country, and you have something to offer, and you have to ask, not only ask, but urge to the European Union, this and that we need. Can you help us with it or not? If not, get away with your blah blah and your treaty. Because this is what we need. In order to improve our education, this and that is what we need. Can you offer it or can't you? We can't live in padding. We can't teach our children with padding, with papers, with treaties. We want this and that and that. Make it concrete. Don't be vague. Don't say, we want to go to this fantastic level of European Union. Ever been in the slums of Brussels? Come on, so fantastic is the European Union not. And so fantastic is Russia not. So, don't believe in those stories. Be self-determined. You are a fantastic country and you want to improve that country. And therefore you need some help. And that's what the treaty is about. Believe in your own power. Television is very powerful. Very powerful. And this country pretends to be a democracy. So use that. That is their weak point. They can't put you in jail, they can't kill you, they can't do nothing against you. So use your power. Do your homework. Before you interview somebody, you do your homework. You go on the internet, you have everything to your assistance. And you can find all the answers. So be critical. Sit directly on his lips, interview, and make interviews tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. That is more interesting to watch, and it's going quicker. It's not going slower as you thought. It's going quicker. You come directly to the heart of the message. Come directly to a question, and don't ask in one phrase 2 questions at the same time. That is very annoying and makes them confused. You confuse them with them. If you write for yourself the questions, you must count the syllables. And if you can say it with less syllables, the same sentence, do it. Avoid difficult words. Avoid abbreviations. Avoid all those things that are difficult to understand. Because in writing, when people don't understand a word, they can reread it. They can read it again. But this is flowing into the air. And if you miss the word, you miss the sentence, and you miss the meaning, and you can't turn it back. So, what will you do? You switch off the television. Or you go to another station. So, be very careful. One watcher is very, very precious. Keep every watcher with you. Because most of your programs, the target group of your programs, are very ordinary people. Not high educated people. Normal people. Like you and me. Normal people. So, keep that audience always in mind. And the moment that somebody is using a difficult word, you interfere. You say, what do you mean? That doesn't mean that you are dumb for the audience, no. It means that you are at their side. That you are carefully listening to every word and interfere if somebody is using difficult word. I'm sure that in the beginning of these courses I told you that you are talking to one person, because you come in every house room as a guest. And you must give the people the impression that you are talking to them. Therefore they are more involved. If you speak to a sala, it's different. It's a different approach. So always try to make intimate situation. Don't lose this intimacy between you and the watcher by talking in pluralis, saying, dear listeners, dear audience, dear... No, you talk to one person. And in your mind it must be one person. It is as if you talk to your grandmother, to your brother, to your lover, to I don't care to whom, but to one person. Never to... There are thousands watching you, but forget about the thousands. You speak to one person. That's the intimacy of this wonderful medium. How do you do that? You do it by sitting very short to the speaker or the expert that is there in your studio. Don't believe any words he or she is saying. Know all the answers. Do your homework. Be an expert yourself. Then you get a dynamic program from itself. More debate. It was said, if we are too critical to our guests, they never come back again. Well, there's a simple solution for that. Be careful that you have two opinions in your studio, two guests with different opinions. Then you get more dynamic and you get debate. And if there is a struggle between people, when there is debate, people like to watch that. Because debate forces you to speak short and to use your brains, because it brings a lot of energy here. Debate is always nice because you formulate better, shorter, more active than when you sit in a chair and just have monologues. So debate helps you, and you are not to blame for the critical questions then. It's the guest, the other guest, discussed very often and not followed enough. But interviewers on television do it standing up, not in a very nice armchair, because that is most of the time very boring. And here another remark was made. It was cheap television. It was cheap television because the terrace that was set there didn't look very cozy, not very inviting. If you look at it, you will say, I'm very glad I'm not sitting there. I'm very glad I'm not there. And that should not be. You must have the impression that it is a cozy place where you are in the middle of the discussion, where you are also, and not as a watcher far away. You have to be inside the whole discussion. More lively. There are different methods to make it more lively. Avoid long monologues. Interrupt. But also have more footage. shorter footage. It's better to have 4 interruptions with shorter footage than 3 interruptions with longer footage. Because every image is better than 1,000 words. So make it very dynamic, make it very lively. Did I forget one of your remarks? Oh yes, what I miss, and what I always miss here, is humor. You are so damn serious. Please make some jokes, make it a little bit lighter. Did we learn? And what was the most important thing? The most important thing is liveliness. Because we have not many means. We are poor television stations. That is normal for all regional stations in the world. They all are poor. I did do programs with American television stations serving communities of 6,000 people, and they were very poor. They have to live on advertisements, and they have to take every penny out of their society they can get. So don't think that you are different or that your situation is special. No, it isn't. So being poor and having to make programs like duplex programs with a studio, with people sitting in the studio having conversations, the liveliness of the program is the most killing. If you have a few people who are boring of themselves, and if the anchor is not capable of breaking through this atmosphere, you really have a problem. Because then you make a boring show. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that you always have to keep in mind that you are working for an audience. You are not working for a sponsor, you're not working for Soros, you're not working for European Union, unless where the money comes from. You're independent journalists, and you do the work on your own responsibility. And your only responsibility is that your audience is understanding what the hell you're talking about. And that you contribute to democracy. And you contribute to democracy by showing that you are not afraid of officials. That officials are normal people who go to the toilet and do other nasty things. And there is no reason to be humble, to be shy, to be very modest, very polite to them. Just behave normal. To a burgomaster, to a mayor, to a vice president, to a minister. They are just sitting there to do their jobs for us as a society. And they have to do their job very well because they are very well paid. So there is no reason to be to them. Just talk normal to them and be critical and show that you're emancipated journalists. Never give bureaucrats the chance to speak from behind their desk. First of all, they have to stand up. Secondly, they have to be taken out of their comfort zone, out of their desk and their bureau. You see how static it becomes if you put 2 persons on one line next to each other. There's no depth in the picture. It's a flat picture. If you make a photograph, you always try to put some person in front, the other there, to get depth in your picture. This is flat. Don't do it. You saw in the footage of the item how nice it is if you have this diagonal lines in your television. It makes it more interesting, and you are more in the midst of it. You're not an outsider, not an outstander. You are in it. For example, when you have a group gathered in assemblies, and I have seen many of those pictures, that when you make a diagonal picture with depth in it, it's much more attractive than when you put them behind the table flat by putting the tripod and the camera right in front. You didn't do that, and you see immediately what is the result. There is depth, and you have the impression that you are taking part in the discussions, that you are there, that you're in the middle of it. And that's a big advantage of using the camera like that. Television is about intimacy, about being there, feeling the atmosphere, the coziness, the tension of this discussion. And that's very important. So instruct your guests very well and say, realize you're not speaking to a mass of people. You as a matter of fact do, but realize that you just speak to one person. So instruct them well. Before you put them in the studio, please give them very good instruction how they should speak. Please come immediately to the point. Airtime costs a lot of money, so use it very well, and don't have a lot of tara around it, but just come directly to the point. And for those bureaucrats, it's difficult to do that because they are used to have a lot of blah blah. But for television watchers, it's killing. So don't let them do that. If you can, try to make lists of female specialists to invite in your studio programs. If you can choose between men and women, always choose the women. Why is that? That is because women are more to the point. Female meetings are shorter than meetings with men, because men all have enormous egos and need more time to show how very important they are. Women don't. Women speak less abstract than men, and women are more to the point than men, and they make a nicer picture. So please, when you have the possibility, ask women. It also has an emancipating effect on your watchers. It shows that there are many women who are capable to talk about many subjects. So please look for women to talk in your programs. And don't always have those boring men. Why don't you show all those activities? I mean, the most static picture I can get is a burgomaster who is speaking at the opening ceremony of a playground. Why don't you show that he is knocking on doors? Just put it in scene. Make a theater, but show how active he is. Or show what the community is doing with the help of the European Union, I don't care. But show that it is a co-work, that it is not only the work of money, but it's also the work of the community that is willing to change their situation, improving their situation. That makes courage. And that's what you should do with television, making courage. Bring people to ideas, not just sit in their chairs and wait for money coming from heaven. It's showing how prosperity and how progress is going. And you show that by showing parents of a playground painting or whatever they do, and in this way improve their level of life, because their children have a nice playground, and that's very important for children, that they can play and that they are growing up in a nice society instead in the middle of some filth. So I want to see images that make people optimistic, not the just telling about the European Union and the money that's coming from there. Because that is very important. That is the whole meaning of this paper that you signed, this treaty. It is trying to bring in motion things that are now static. I like to see dynamic. I told you before, this is very boring. This is not boring. Movement, I want to see movement. I want to see things in progress. And if you show a village, don't show an overview. Show close-ups of people who are doing things. Because in a village, everybody is doing things. Milking a cow, or harvesting, or planting, or whatever they do. If you say there are many people there living on agricultural, and there is a specialist who say in most countries it's just 4% agricultural activity, and in our country it is such a high level. What is, as a matter of fact, pure nonsense. Because a highly developed country like the United States of America is totally depending on the export of agricultural products and weapons, by the way, but agricultural products is very important export product because the world needs food. So it is not something to talk about with disdain and saying agricultural business is of a lower level. It's very important, and you can make a lot of money with it. The whole magic of making television programs is that you grab the attention and lead your audience through the story.